Jet watched Sokka with an intense concentration. The Water Tribe teen had to fight to keep from fidgeting under the scrutiny. He was not successful. For all that the wheat-chewing boy unnerved him. Sokka couldn't deny that Jet was impressive, both in combat and somehow managing to keep dozens of kids alive in treehouses right under the Fire Nation's nose. Sokka had enough trouble keeping 2 kids alive on the back of a flying bison, and the Fire Nation hadn't even known they had existed until General Mutton Chops had caught sight of them a few ports back. Besides, you didn't necessarily have to trust someone or like them to want them to like you. He wasn't sure why he didn't trust Jet, but his instincts had been screaming bad news ever since they met the dude, and his instincts were never wrong, no matter what Katara said. Well, as long as she didn't count the whole 2 fishhooks incident, or the thought Aang was a Fire Nation thing, or the seal leopard boomerang fiasco, or... that wasn't the point. His instincts were never wrong with important things, and they didn't trust Jet. He wasn't sure why. Jet seemed to have just some cool, suave, in-charge guy with a healthy hate for the bad guys. Regardless, the team remained wary. He listened to his instincts, even when no one else would. Eventually, Jet nodded to himself. Look, Sokka, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I think maybe we're too similar. That's why we didn't exactly get along at first. I get you and you get me. We've both been hurt by the Fire Nation. We both know that we have to always be prepared. We know that it's safest if you assume everything's a trap until proven otherwise. I think you get that a lot better than a lot of the kids I bring in. Definitely more than Katara and Aang. Sokka wanted to groan. How dare Jet not be the worst when his instincts were like this? Jet was the worst! Still, maybe he wasn't wrong. Paranoia was a thing. Maybe just this once he could ease up on his instincts a bit. After all, Jet had trusted him enough to invite him on this patrol. He could try and meet the wheat chewer halfway. The water teen made himself relax against the tree they were hiding in. Seeing a smile at Jet he had hoped didn't look as forced as it felt. Yeah, maybe you're right. To be honest, I'd almost rather these 2 didn't have to think like that. As long as they listened when I did. But you know. Jet nodded empathetically. I do know. You want to protect them. Keep them away from the evils of war. We, he gestured to his freedom fighters, do that for the rest of the kids. Try and keep them from the worst. You get it. Sometimes you have to do hard things to win this battle, but we need to do what we can to get ahead against an enemy like that. He shoved a hand in the general direction of the Fire Nation invaded town with a scowl. But sometimes you keep these hard things a secret, to protect them. Sokka squirmed, growing uncomfortable with the hard look in the other teen's eye. At the look that had been mirrored in all the eyes of all the freedom fighters who had come on this patrol. He didn't hide things from Katara, not even when they were hard. They were a team, had been since he had to lead hunting parties with all the able-bodied women in a devastated village, and the 2 of them butchered their first seal together. He could kinda get it. They had tried to hide what the Fire Nation soldiers had done from Aang, but he hadn't really done anything that he had tried to hide from Katara. Even before the Kyoshi warriors, before he thought the women could be fighters, he knew that his sister was tough. She was kind and could be emotional, but he'd seen her make more than enough hard choices after their father had left. He didn't really hide much from her. Then again, Jet was caring for much younger people. Guessed it would make sense. Shut up, instincts. Nobody asked you. Yeah, I guess. He stammered uncertainly. Smellerbee looked at him sharply, but whatever she caught in his voice, Jet missed. The tan teen nodded sharply and stood. All right. I think I trust you, Sokka. I have something you need to see. Pipsqueak, the Duke. Continue the watch. Smellerbee, with me. Are you sure that's a good idea? Smellerby asked, eyes darting back and forth between the two teen boys. Jet frowned at her, but nodded, determined. I'm sure. We haven't really been getting anywhere with this recently. Though Sokka convinced the others, the Benders, to help. The younger child's eyes widened as she caught on to the other teen's plan. A small smile flit across her lips. That's a good point. Okay, if you're sure, I trust you. Jet nodded solemnly, understanding that there were a few heavier phrases. Sokka fidgeted awkwardly, no longer sure that he wanted to know what they were talking about. Who was he kidding? He was dying to know. But that didn't stop him from knowing that whatever it was something very bad. Still, he didn't argue as Jet abruptly turned, taking them back through the forest. Sokka shrugged and followed. It couldn't not go now. Jet took him through a whirling path, through the woods into one of the cavernous areas that seemed to be literally littering the Earth Kingdom. Like seriously, Sokka had never been in the Earth Kingdom and needed a cave and not been able to find one. What were all these caves? Did Earthbenders make them for fun? Jet walked past dozens of identical caves, weaving through the canyon, with ease before slipping into the entrance of one. Immediately the thin kid, with the bow and wide-brimmed hat, stepped from the darkness. The kid eyed the group in confusion, though he said nothing. Longshot? Jet said in greeting, and Longshot nodded in reply. I thought our new friends might be able to help solve some of the performance issues we've been having. The younger teen looked as dubious as Smellerby had, but silently stepped back and allowed them entrance to the cave. Sokka's curiosity and unease had both been growing steadily at the same rate throughout the trip. He had really wished this super sketchy display would help one or the other win, but nope, it was still 1,000,000 to 1,000,000. Jet took Sokka deeper into the cave. Smellerby elected to stick behind with Longshot. Sokka shivered as they went deeper into the earth. The temperature dropped drastically once they were out of range of the sun's rays. The cavern was full of curving twists and turns, and it wasn't long before the only light source in the cave was the torch held in Jet's hand. Sokka briefly considered that Jet had brought him there to kill him, before quickly discarding the thought. Why had Longshot guarded a potential murder site? Unless this was an active murder site, and Sokka was just being added to his weird criminal ledger. Sokka knew this was a bad idea. The teen blinked when Jet stopped, come to face with a metal door inlaid into the stone of the cavern. It looked like it had been there a while. Chisel marks and scratches betrayed that it had been fitted into the cave wall, but they were old. Some of the patches covered by forming stalactites and stalagmites. There were scrapes in the stone floor of the cave in a quarter circle right outside the door, showing evidence that the door was opened frequently. It was a straight metal sheet, with a square barred window about 6 inches long and 3 inches tall at about eye height. What's this? He asked. His voice uncharacteristically quiet in the eerie, still atmosphere of the cavern. Sokka had never been so certain that he was about to be murdered. Jet simply handed him the torch, speaking equally quietly. See for yourself. Yep, we're dead. He had a good life. Sokka gulped and accepted the fire, moving forward uncertainly. He peered through the window and found that on the other side of the door, the cave expanded greatly, opening into a round basin several times larger than the cavern they walked through. The walls, though rough rock, were exact, forming a perfect circle roughly 45 yards wide, with no entrance or exit other than the one they come through. It was exceedingly obvious this place was carved by earthbenders, rather than being a natural cave. It was also obvious that the cave had seen a good number of battles. The walls were covered in thin white scratches and scrapes, crumbling rock from bludgeoning weapons, dark spots of burgundy red were blood soaked into the rock, and, most telling, brown patches of ash and soot on the walls and ceiling. It was a clear sign of firebending. All this Sokka noticed and categorized in the back of his mind as he stared at the main feature of the room, a figure sitting in the very center, with their back to the window. Even from this far away, Sokka could see a long chain stretching from the wall and pulling on the ground beside the figure, disappearing from view around where their hidden wrists or ankles might be. "Who is that?" Sokka asked, speaking louder than before in his surprise. The figure whirled then, and Sokka locked gazes with a teen boy, only a year or two older than him. The stranger's cheeks were gaunt, his skin deathly pale except for a smattering of bruises, and a dark red scar that took up half his face. The boy looked at him in shock for a moment, and then the expression morphed into a poisonous glare as Jet stepped up to join Sokka at the window. "Firebender," Jet replied with acid in his tone. Then, with less acid and more smirk, he added, "Our training dummy." Sokka knew he should have trusted his instincts.